So welcome everyone to this meeting of the Borough Council, Cheltenham Borough Council's Cabinet. I'm Rowena Hay, Councillor Rowena Hay, the leader of the council. We don't have any members of the public here. Well, we do actually. Welcome, Carmelo. Or the press, should I say. We don't have any public present, but for anybody watching, this is a recorded meeting, and there is cameras in operation in the foyers and in the public gallery. Not that there is anybody there tonight. We don't expect there to be a fire alarm test, so any alarm that goes off, it will be the real McCoy, so we should all immediately make our way to the nearest fire exit. Turning to apologies, Councillor Victoria Atherstone, I wish her a speedy recovery. Are there any members who's got declarations of interest? No? So that takes us on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the last meetings, which you can see on pages 5 to 20. Has any members got any comments that they'd like to make on those minutes? No? If I could see a show of hands then to approve those. Thank you. We don't have any questions from the public or from members. There's nothing that's been referred from council scrutiny, overview and scrutiny, or any other committee, which takes us on to the reports for tonight. The first report tonight is that of the Housing Revenue Account revised forecast 2024 and interim budget proposals for the 2025-26 for consultation. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is a really exciting report in many ways because it is the first of what we can only hope will be at least a few HRA reports from the formerly CBH, now Cheltenham Borough Council team who deliver fantastic social housing across Cheltenham. And I think this report in particular really highlights the opportunities that we have to, having brought that team in and brought the teams back together, make really effective efficiency choices which allow us to invest in improving our housing stock, invest in the kinds of local community projects that our tenants deserve, and ensure that standards are raised to the highest possible gradients across our portfolio, from stakeholders to tenants to those who own their properties on CBH lands and sites. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I have said that twice, but I say that for good reason, because I think this report highlights the potential growth that we offer here, the potential to have money spare, money that we can really reinvest into homes. It's something we haven't had for some time, and it's a real opportunity for us. So I do hope that cabinet members across the chamber, if you have any questions, feel free to offer them. But otherwise, hope you support this paper.
Any member? No, this is, I mean, obviously, this is the first housing revenue account interim budget proposals that we're putting forward as our housing services are back in the fold of CBC. So that's exciting as well. And it is to reiterate that it is for consultation. And actually, the only other comment I'd make is, you know, it would be good if members of the public and as many people as possible did actually give us some feedback on our budgets. It's really important. Councillor Lewis, do you want to sum up? No. So if I could then see a show of hands to approve this paper for consultation, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. I should have said it's actually largely the Councillor Lewis show tonight. It's the General Fund Revenue and Capital interim budget proposals to go out to consultation. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. This is only my second report and I've only got 2, so I'm not sure where the idea that I'll be speaking all evening comes from, but the speech is a bit long, so I may be speaking for some time. So I did have originally a speech planned out for this budget. I've been writing it for a couple of weeks, and it was very much predicated on the idea that the budget that we were going to set in the next year was going to be one that would be setting the long-term financial future of the people of Cheltenham of well over a decade, one might imagine. But since then, a few things have changed somewhat from central government. So I think that speech quite possibly needs to be thrown out the window, and I've written a different one instead. So I came into local government as a optimistic and in many ways sort of joyously naive young woman when I was a teenager, because I believed it was one of the most worthwhile forms of public service that one could give their life to. It was an unbroken chain of people across the country who all believed that the future of our town and the future of our country could be brilliant, but only if people were able to give their time, their talents, and their local knowledge to paving that possible future for our town and for our country. The plans that local government made were made in decades. They were made in centuries. They were certainly not made in years. And you knew in many ways that when you could no longer carry that mantle, when you could no longer give your time, your effort, and the work that we all as councillors put into keeping these councils running, that somebody else would follow you. And so that belief in local government's position is so important to me, and it's why this budget needs a slightly different framing in the current context. It's that local government, in the way we set budgets in our town and in this country, was driven by local people, local knowledge, and local decisions. It wasn't just by people who can afford the 6 figures that it costs to become a member of parliament. It wasn't just by people who had the right friends or the right grandfather to be in the House of Lords. But here we are in what is a very difficult time for local government, and with one rather unfortunate stroke from central government. Our role in safeguarding the money that Cheltenham has been carefully granted through years of investment and from the taxpayers of Cheltenham has fundamentally changed. And we as a council now face what is frankly a terminal diagnosis. We have no choice as a council but to make the very best decisions we can in a lifespan that we do not know how long it may be. And with that in mind, this budget looks slightly different than it did when we started writing it. So our recovery that is outlined in this document, our plan to ensure that we have spending money to do good things for the people of Cheltenham, has gone from nice, then maybe we could stretch out a little bit, to non-negotiable and now. Because we live in a critical window of time for democracy here in Cheltenham. We may be in the last years of our lives and in our entire lives in which decisions about Cheltenham, its future, and how its money is spent are made here in Cheltenham, not in Gloucester, and not in Whitehall. It is made by people who know our town best, the people who live in it, who give their time, their effort, their homes, and their families to keeping our town running. And so I do stand here, or sit here even, rather awkwardly in a position where I may be the last cabinet member for finance for this authority, or the second to last, which is a position to be in that is immense in its weight and the pressure that that puts on my back, on the back of the team that I work with. The decisions that we make now will decide how decades of careful financial management, investment strategies that were drawn up for decades of Cheltenham's future, for our children and for our grandchildren, how they play out and how that story ends will be defined over the next few years. And while I don't know what that's going to mean, I don't know if Keir Starmer knows what that's going to mean, one thing I think we can all agree on as councillors in this chamber is that we will go out with a bang and not with a whimper. So this budget is a consultative document, and that's quite lucky in many ways, because I think there may have to be some changes over the festive period. I think any of us who were hoping to have a kickback Christmas and watch Love Actually quite possibly are in a slightly different position to where we expected to be now. But one thing that we have to consider is that our job in these last final few years is to ensure that every penny that the people of Cheltenham have given us and every penny that we've invested for Cheltenham's long-term future is safeguarded for the people of Cheltenham. Because one thing we know is that it's people of Cheltenham's money. It's not Gloucester's money. It's certainly not Keir Starmer's money. And we as a team, I know all of us as councillors, will ensure down to the very last penny that we can, we will invest it back into the people of Cheltenham. So nonetheless, in many ways, despite the curveball that central government have thrown at us, I stand by this budget. I think it's prudent. I think it's a plan that was always designed to be a long-term recovery aspect. And we've still got some room to recover, but it creates breathing space. It creates room for innovation, for smart choices, and for us to make the decisions that we have to make to ensure that Cheltenham's long-term future, whether we're here or not, carries on in a way that we as Liberals and as councillors and as people who believe in democracy and the role that local decision-making plays in fostering innovation and giving people choices continues. And the real principle, I think, in this budget that I love so much, it's so scrappy, you find these pieces here, there and everywhere, that we as councillors and we as officers and we as a team here in Cheltenham know that doing the right thing and doing what is necessary is really bloody expensive. But we will find a way. We have always found a way, and this budget is quite possibly the pinnacle of how we have managed to do so much with so little and how much of a plan we have to do even more. So I commend this paper, I commend the work of the officers who have done so much to bring this budget together and who have spent decades in many ways in their careers ensuring that Cheltenham has the financial luxuries that it currently has compared to many other councils. And I do welcome any other questions.
Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, for that passionate introduction to the report and the budget papers. I agree wholeheartedly with pretty much everything you said. In fact, I can't think of anything I disagree with. It is a tricky one because we've been really working hard with our finances over many years. And you rightly mentioned Keir Starmer. I'm sure that pretty much up and down the length of the country, that white paper is being analysed and read through and trying to formulate the implications of it. So it's a bit, the question I'm going to ask is a bit difficult. I don't really want to focus on it because I'd like to talk about all the lovely things in this budget paper which go to support loads of people across the town for a whole variety of things, let alone the standard services we provide, but especially for those people that struggle in our town, we as this administration, time and again, put those support measures in place. I'd like to talk about those. But the question I suppose I've got more specifically is around that white paper, and it's a difficult one because you'll be knitting the fog right now, but presumably and hopefully by the time we come out of the consultation and towards budget setting in February, you may have a better understanding of what resource implications there may or may not be. Like I say, I suppose it's a bit like putting a finger up in the air right now, but I thought I'd ask the question anyway as to, you know, will there be something in that budget paper we may not know about? Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Pete. And I mean, I was up very late last night reading through the white paper and the letters that have come out with it, partially because I don't have a life and partially because looking at this budget, I was thinking, what on earth does this budget need to mean with all of this Whitehall jargon that's coming out here? What's actually going to matter here? And I think there's so many people across the country, councils like ours, the LGA, who are trying to work out exactly what some of it means. And until we know what some of it means, we can't put a line in the sand for some of the choices that we're going to make. But I think that principle that this is Cheltenham's money and that we will do everything we can to ensure that every penny we possibly can within the scope of what's legally permissible within the white paper and what's coming in terms of local government reorganisation is spent on the people of Cheltenham for the people of Cheltenham is the principle I think we'll start from, and we will see where we go from there.
Councillor Horwood.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to welcome the report, but also applaud Councillor Lewis's passionate speech, actually, as colleagues have done as well. I mean, we have had government in this town, for this town, since incorporation in 1876. You can go back even to the establishment of the town commissioners in 1786. And she's right that, you know, we don't yet know exactly what the white paper means for Cheltenham government. But if that 200 plus year history of government by Cheltenham people of Cheltenham is due to come to an end at some point, then we need to be very careful about the messages we send to central government, but also about the care we take of our assets and resources here locally. And I'm very pleased that that's the approach she's taking in this budget. And as the Cabinet Member for Economic Development, Culture and Wellbeing, I have to say I'm particularly pleased that those three areas, which are largely discretionary, are protected. We don't have to invest in place marketing. We don't have to support local business in the way that we do. But I'm very proud that we've always been able to do that. We don't have to protect our cultural assets like the festivals. We don't have to support bodies like the Everyman Theatre and the the Wilson Art Gallery Museum and the other assets of the Cheltenham Trust and its heritage buildings in the way that we do, but I'm pleased that we've always been able to do that as well. And that's because our management of our finances and the management of resources and our investment decisions that we've taken and previous finance leads have done so as well. Looking at the leader now, Councillor Hay, who held this portfolio for some time, we've taken sensible and wise decisions and looked after Cheltenham's finances, and that's why we can make that kind of sensible discretionary spending. But it's also because we are from Cheltenham and we know Cheltenham and we understand the local situation. And I do worry about local government reorganisation imposed from on high that might disturb that balance and might lead to worse decision making. And I think we have to be very careful about that. And I'm pleased she's addressed that in public.
Councillor Clucas.
Can I thank you, Martin, for what you've just said? I think it's really important that people in Cheltenham understand how much this council cares for its people, for the assets that it has built over the years, and for how we're able to spend those in a way that the people wish to see. Whether that's culture, No Child Left Behind, whether it's our buildings, all of that is deeply important to the people of Cheltenham, as is supporting local communities. And what I will say is that experience, learning about that over the last few years, and the commercialisation of this council, which has been a significant tool in building the resources that we have, has been something I have been delighted to be able to share with colleagues across Europe, because that is not something that they actually often hear about or see in relation to the UK. And so it's something new, something that they can talk about, learn about, think about, perhaps develop for themselves. And it's a great thing to be able to do. So thank you very much for the presentation you've just given. I think it's really good that the people of Cheltenham understand what is behind what we do financially. And being able to do that in a way that's understandable is terrific. So thank you.
I can't see any other member indicating. Are you happy to go straight to the vote? Thank you. So could I see a show of hands to approve this budget to go out to consultation, please? Thank you very much. The next report actually is Councillor Lewis as well. It's the counter fraud. You said you'd only got 2. I knew you got 3, but there you go. So your report on the counter fraud.
Yes, so this report is possibly less lively than the previous speech I've just given. It's very much continuity, but continuity in what can only be described as a really good way. I know that the team in counter fraud invest so much time and so much effort as a cross-county effort with other councils across the area to tackle these issues. And it's really important, as we were saying, with these discretionary services and the extra money that we're able to put into doing good work, that programmes like this continue and that we are able to invest in tackling these really quite substantial problems that face residents, particularly those most vulnerable across our town. So I welcome this report, which in many ways is continuation of a good thing rather than wild alteration of a previous report. And I hope that we all back it in principle.
Is there any member who wants to make a comment on this paper? No, it's one that comes every year, so with a few tweaks and updates. But they're a really important part of what we do, and I'm very glad that we're part of that in-house, as it were, with sharing across other authorities, because it's far better and more effective than doing it alone, really, each of us. So if I could see a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. We then move on to the First Homes Technical Advice Note, and that's the report of Councillor Clucas.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this is an advice note for developers in relation to first homes and potential differences in relation to the homes that might be provided. And before I continue, can I just say thank you to Martin and to Ewan for the work that they have been doing on this over a period of time. It makes a huge difference to have officers who both know what they're talking about, but are prepared to listen to. And if you have both, then I have to say you're on to a winner. So thank you both very much. The paper before you is an advice note, as I've said, to developers. It is not out for general consultation. It simply advises them as to how Cheltenham Borough would look in relation to first homes, shared ownership, which is our preference, and other areas too. So that would go out to developers, and obviously over the next year or so, we will look at that and see if any changes need to be made, and I, in consultation with officers, would report those to Cabinet. We're happy to take any questions any colleague has.
Does any member have any comments on this technical advice note? Yes, Councillor Horwood.
Just one quick comment. There was one part of the report that I particularly welcomed, which is the reiteration of our policy on what the split of affordable housing should be, which actually says that the ideal is not really to do very much of this first homes scheme at all, which I think is right, because I think it is a slightly, well, it's a challenging scheme, let's put it like that. But that we put a very strong emphasis, 75%, I think is our preferred percentage on affordable housing being social housing for rent. And I think that's exactly right. And I think as a party, nationally and locally, we've always put a strong emphasis on the need to have more social housing for rent, because there are areas, and they're not always the areas that are most obvious, but areas including Leckhampton, where our affordability gap is enormous between what young people can afford to live in and what the local private sector housing market can offer. So I really welcome that, and I think it's an important part of this report. But she's absolutely right. We need to have a backup advice for developers if first homes is appropriate in any circumstances. But I think the emphasis of our policy is exactly right.
Any other member? No? Councillor Clucas, do you want to say anything more, or should we go to the vote?
Can we just go to the vote, please, Leader?
So the recommendations are clearly set out on page 56. I don't know why I did that, because actually I did want to just say I know how much work has gone into this. Sorry, but and the back and forth, and I'd really add my thanks to Martin and Ewan, because I know there was a huge amount of toing and froing, and I thank you for your time in making all those changes as well. So if we can go to the vote now, as the recommendations are set out. If I could see a show of hands. Thank you. So our next report is CBC's fencing, hedgerow and boundary policy. All sounds a bit odd, but I'm sure we'll all be illuminated. I mean, it is clear in the report, but actually when you look at that as a heading, it's quite odd. That's the report of Councillor Clucas.
Yes, Leader. Just to say that this report is actually about hedgehogs. It's about, it's about wildlife. It's about actually making sure that where our tenants are, they are able to ensure that if they have hedgerows, then they know how to look after them, that the help will be there for them. If they have fences, then the fences are not too high. If they have an issue with private sector resident in a neighbouring house, then they are able to look at how we deal with an issue with fencing or hedging. And it's from that perspective, really, that this will be good in terms of what we are able to offer our tenants, what we are able to give them in terms of assistance, and also because it means that Cheltenham, in some areas, will begin to look nicer, look better, and provide a better home for our hedgehogs, which I think actually is a really good thing to do, isn't it? Thank you.
Any member wish to comment on this paper? No? Could I see a show of hands then as per the recommendations that are on page 116? If I could see a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Our final report of the evening is that of the approval for publication of this year's infrastructure funding statement and SIL rate summary statement. That's the report of Councillor Collins.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I don't know what it is, but why am I always last to present my report? But if I can be serious for a moment, I'll just move on. We've heard some passionate speeches tonight and talk of service. Well, I want everyone to know that there's only one television programme that I watch every single year without fail. And tonight I'm going to be missing the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. So that's the best I can do, I'm afraid. I'm sure that we've all read the statement. Notice I use the word statement rather than the word report there. We have a statutory obligation, a legal obligation, to publish both the infrastructure funding statement and the annual rates summary. As I say, it's a legal requirement. And this report complies with our corporate priorities here at CBC. The information that is set out in the report is in a set format, so we just can't communicate it as we like. We have to do it in a agreed way. So we basically can't make anything up. Don't forget that everything is agreed with our strategic and local partners or partnership partners. Too many words, partners in that statement, I know, but it's not just a CBC requirement. We have to do it in collaboration with other people. You will see that the first meeting to make allocations from the pooled strategic monies takes place on the 30th of January next year. And that work also goes on with other infrastructure providers as well. So we can identify priorities that could be supported by the Community Infrastructure Levy Joint Committee. I will draw your attention to a couple of parts of the report. On page 119, there is quite a useful, well, at least I thought it was a useful summary about both receipts and allocations. The reason I'm using the word allocations is because the money might have been agreed and it might have actually been given to various bodies, but it doesn't actually mean that they've spent it yet. I remember we had a long debate last year on the pie chart that was part of this report, and I'll quickly go through the elements that make up that total, if you like. So it's 5% or up to 5% can be spent on administration, up to 15% on our parished areas, of which we have 5 in the town, another 15% on neighbourhood projects, and then the final element is the strategic pot, which the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed it says 70%, but it's currently at 80%. If you read footnote 9, you'll see why that is, because we haven't had any bids from certain parts of our community so far. Obviously, I'm not going to go through every item line by line, but the required information is there. It is contained within the report. If I talk about the annual SIL rate summary statement, it is again a regulatory requirement, and it has to be based upon the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, or RICS, Community Infrastructure Levy Index. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? On page, I won't talk about that. I don't think there's any need to talk about that particular bit, but you can see the monies have passed onto parish councils, that we have passed on to parish councils on pages 131 and 132. And on pages 133 and 135, the money is allocated to the non-parished areas of the borough. The report also covers the details of Section 106 monies that have been allocated, and you'll see that they are mainly for affordable housing provisions, although there are, I think, 2 other items as well. And the detail of that is contained on 138 and 139. I know I'm reading out a lot of pages to you guys, and I do hope you're keeping up with me. Then on page 143, 145, you can see the list of projects requesting SIL funding. And these requests are across all three members of the partnership. So they're not all just Cheltenham Borough Council, and you'll see that there's all sorts of things that have been asked about. I suppose the final thing that I should say is that on page 147 onwards, there is the annual SIL rate summary statement. And again, I can't emphasise too much that it is a regulatory requirement. So please don't ask me any questions on it. But that's basically it. So I don't know if anyone's got anything they'd like to come back to me on.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. And this is a great report, even if it is in a government-required format. So you can't be too creative with it. But I think there's so much interesting stuff in there if you take some time and really dig into it, which is something I've done because, again, I don't have a life. But I was wondering, moving forward, if it would be possible to have sort of a summary sheet almost of what's in that legally required sort of template, so people can really get their heads around what money goes in, what money goes out, what's going where. Because at the moment you kind of have to trace it with a bit of red string to work out what's going on. Is that possible moving forward?
Yeah, I've got a feeling that there was something like that in the past. Yeah, which isn't here. I can certainly take that back to the relevant team and ask if that is possible to provide it or why it's not provided here. But so that's a summary of the ins and outs, yeah, of SIL funding thus far. Yeah, okay, I'll take that away.
Councillor Horwood.
Thanks, Leader. And yes, actually, I can confirm, since I held the portfolio before, that we did used to produce a clear one-page summary, which I think, as Councillor Lewis has said, the government prescribed format is really opaque. Actually, it makes it very difficult to follow the flows. So it would be good to have that. I was quite sad to pass on the planning portfolio to Councillor Collins, but I have to say I haven't really missed the infrastructure funding statement, which was a bit like maths homework, to be honest, every year. But it does contain really important information. And I just want to ask a little bit about the community fund or the neighbourhood fund element, the sort of 15 to 20%, where we've got a lot of good detail in this report about the SIL spending against the neighbourhood fund in the unparished areas of Cheltenham. We've got brilliant projects like the Bath Road utility box repainting, like the defibrillator project, like possibly the best named local government project ever, which is Honeybourne Honey, which is to promote biodiversity and improve quality of life on the Honeybourne line. Really good project. But there isn't any detail in this report about the projects that have been done at parish level, which is a separate stream to the unparished areas. And I think in the past we have also reported that, and I'm not quite sure for what reason. Maybe the timing was wrong for this time or something. But I think it would be really good to have a report on the actual expenditure as opposed to just the money allocated to parishes, because that's been interesting reading in the past. And I should probably declare that I'm a Leckhampton with Warden Hill parish councillor and a member of their finance committee as well. Just for transparency, although I don't regard that as a prejudicial interest.
Yeah, thanks for that. That is interesting. So, I mean, I did say at the beginning that it's the monies that have been allocated rather than spent. But I think that would, if we are allowed to do it, that would be something that would improve the communication here and the information that's contained within the report. So I think I was making a note. What you're asking for is we've got a breakdown there of the neighbourhood fund and where that money's gone, but you'd like something similar for the parish areas as well.
The neighbourhood fund goes in both directions. So there's the unparished area we've got, but it's the parish bit, which is spent by the parish.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I thought I meant. Well, it's what I thought I said. It's what I meant anyway. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can certainly bring that back.
I can't see any other member indicating to speak. So, Councillor Collins, are you happy to go straight to the vote?
Yes, absolutely.
So the recommendations are clearly set out in there. Can I see a show of hands to support that? Thank you very much. That was the final agenda item, or the final report of the evening. That moves us on now to the section 6, which is briefing session from Cabinet members. Councillor Horwood.
Only briefly, I suppose, on the culture side, to congratulate the Everyman Theatre on launching its panto for this year, which is Aladdin, featuring Tweedy the Clown as Tweedy Twanky. And I'm sure there's oh no, it isn't, joke somewhere in this speech, but I can't think of it offhand. So I just want to say it's great to have an important regional theatre in Cheltenham, and we've always been strong in our support of the Everyman, and including its not always so visible social programmes, which are very important. So definitely congratulate the Everyman on the opening of the Panto, and I hope to see many cabinet members attending.
Councillor Clucas.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think that's brilliant because I know the work that Everyman do with communities, and it's fantastic that we are able to support them. Interestingly, I was at some European meetings in the last couple of weeks. Yes, one was in Karlsruhe in Germany. Not a terribly comfortable 12-hour train journey each way, but there you go. That's what happens when you go to European meetings. And one of the really good discussion points was culture and how we can actually utilize culture to bring our young people together and to build a better society in our towns. And I was able to say how much of that is actually done here in Cheltenham, which is great because people love to hear about stuff like that. The other thing, obviously, I mentioned earlier, is our role as a commercial entity. And for many across Europe, that is something they have never envisaged. It's not something they do. So showing not only that you can do it as a local authority, but actually the difference it makes has actually fired a good deal of interest, which I think is really good. The other one I meant to was not in Europe, but in Leeds. And that was a meeting of the UK members of the UK French Forum. And that's ministers, 2 ambassadors, a lot of people who are engaged at the professional level as officers, senior officers, and a number of us as councillors attending. And again, it is really interesting to hear what is going on and how, but also to be able to contribute through what we do here. And one of the things that I have suggested, or 2 of the things I've suggested that they might wish to look at, and they have agreed so to do, in fact, they were quite keen to, is firstly, in France, there is a national music day on the 21st of June. If ever you've been there on the 21st of June, you will walk down a street wherever you are, and there'll be people playing instruments, people singing. There will be all sorts going on during the day. These aren't always professional musicians, professional performers. There'll be amateurs as well. And I've suggested we could actually look at developing that as a cross-Europe event on the 21st of March. And I would love Cheltenham actually to be one of the leaders of that. The second thing I've suggested to them is actually bringing together all those organisations, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, for example, of which I am a member for the LGA, that has 41 countries, 1 million councillors, just imagine that, crikey, 1 million councillors, and we actually exchange good practice in what we do, and we work together on European and other legislative interests that we have. And what I've suggested is, why not bring all of those bodies like CEMR, like the Committee of the Regions, like Eurocities together, so that we can actually develop a European focus for the work that we wish to do, and do that as a group, because that gives us strength. And one of the areas I would love to see us look at is, for example, where we have money available from the European Union, whether we, as external to that, could actually use our input as match funding so that both sides benefit, but that each side actually has its own mechanisms for so doing. So they're looking at that as well. And I just think that there is a real opportunity here for Cheltenham to take the lead. And through the LGA, I think there is that opportunity, and I don't think we should pass it up. So that's what I've been doing in the last couple of weeks, Leader, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Councillor Clucas. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank Thank you, Leader. I've not really got anything specific, more but in general as an update in terms of it's been a busy year. I'd like to put on record my thanks for all the teams I work with. As you can imagine, the Golden Valley Development Project, which I'm sure you guys are well aware of, is a complex project, but our teams from both this Borough Council and HPD, Henbury Developments, our development partner, are working feverishly, as always. And it's been a busy year, so I'll put on record my thanks for them. Also, our teams across the council in terms of our housing delivery and other areas that across my portfolio, it's quite a complex and busy area in trying to deliver homes. So again, put on record my thanks and wish them all a Merry Christmas. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Doby.
Thank you, Leader. Last week, I visited Bourneside School to see progress on a most important project, a multi-million-pound investment in a ground-based heat pump to warm and indeed to cool Gloucestershire's largest secondary school. And as this council's cabinet member for climate emergency, I was most impressed by the vision and commitment of Bourneside's head, Steve Jeffries, and his governors to invest in this exciting technology, thereby reducing dependency on fossil fuels and so reducing CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, and also saving money for the school. Sadly, this contrasts with the Gloucestershire County Council, who previously rejected my suggestion as the relevant county councillor to incorporate a heat pump into the construction of the newish high school at Campton. And I trust that in the near future, every newly built school in Gloucestershire will incorporate environmentally friendly, that is low carbon heating systems as a standard default. Maybe from as early as after the GCC elections in May. Thank you.
Councillor Telford.
Have I pressed that, wouldn't it? Thank you. So a few things from me. One, we've recently launched a new tree sponsorship scheme at the crematorium, well, at the cemetery, really, because obviously previously we were offering that in our parks and everyone was wanting to plant trees in the same parks, and in those parks we run out of room to plant more of these trees. So we're offering it that you can sponsor a tree at the cemetery instead, and we're in their native oak trees that are being planted, and hopefully that's a nice commemorative way people can remember loved ones in a very nice place. Obviously, people don't generally go to the cemetery for a wander around, but it is quite a nice place to go have a wander around. It's very peaceful, and it'll be a really nice commemorative location for these trees. But also, on the other side of my portfolio, with the bins, obviously this Christmas, I think it's worth saying we're doing stuff differently. People haven't seen yet with our collections for waste and recycling over Christmas. So if someone was having a collection on the 25th, 26th or 27th of December, those collections will now be the 8th, 9th and 10th of January. Those collections in January will be bumper collections. So if someone has extra recycling, they can just sort it out, put it in a bag next to their boxes, and that will be taken on that day. If they have extra waste, again, they can be left alongside their bins and they could take it. I would encourage residents, if they're worried about how much they've got, to go to the Bring Bank sites that we've got around the town, and the HRC will obviously be open until the 10th of January. If someone's got more of the black bag residual waste they need to take somewhere. We're doing this primarily so our waste recycling teams can have a proper break over Christmas. You know, we all hope, a lot of us can be reading a white paper now instead, but we all hope that most of us can get some proper time off over Christmas and spend it with family and friends, but usually they don't get that luxury. And after every bank holiday, they're always having to do catch-ups on the Saturdays. So it's right that we trial this and give them the chance to actually have some proper time off. So they were asked the question, would they rather have that overtime or would they rather have time off? And they chose time off, and that was agreed with the unions. So I think it's right that we trial it. And then if it doesn't work, we'll put our hands up. Well, I'll put my hands up. And next year we'll try something differently and see what else we can do for them. But I think it is right we try this for them. It also helps us get our collections back to normal more quickly. We're not having multiple days of catch-up days. We'll just have the one after the new year. So hopefully that makes things a little bit easier. But I hope the residents will work with me on this to make it work for our teams. And I'll look forward to feedback from them, good, bad or neutral. I've already had all of those sides already. So as we go forward, thank you.
Councillor Collins, just so that you don't feel like you're last again.
Thank you, Lydia. You know, I thought you were going to do that. I would just like to say, I've got one thing I want to go through, but I would like to say that I thought it was really nice of Councillor Jeffries there to sort of say, this is the time of the year, we've all had a very busy year, and just to give a bit of a nod to our teams, and the teams I've been working with, honestly, certainly on policy development or policy management, it seems like there's a new paper or an update of an existing paper every single week. And I've got people ringing me up and sending me emails, have you done this yet? So it's, there's an awful lot of work that goes into that, and it wouldn't happen without dedicated professional officers. The thing that I perhaps should mention is it seems to have been trumped by the white paper, but the National Planning Policy Framework that came out recently, we've got a new government this year, and they've looked at it and they've made some changes, and some of those changes are quite major. And here in Cheltenham, we've got new housing targets when it used to be the 5-year land supply. Well, basically, I think we've got to deliver the houses in that 5-year land supply in 4 years now, and they've added a year onto it to make it, you've got to just demonstrate a 6-year land supply. So there's an awful lot going on there, and I think that what I've asked the team to do is when they've gone through it and analysed absolutely everything that has changed, that we as members, not just as a cabinet, but we as members get a policy briefing note. Well, it'll explain exactly what the changes are. So apart from that, Merry Christmas to everybody, and see you next year.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. And I mean, the first thing I need to say is that the budget consultation will be open over the festive season. So if you are getting a bit bored of the Love Actually reruns, just before you see the new Wallace and Gromit on Christmas Day, you do have a chance to have your say on how your council tax is spent, which I always think is quite useful. I love these kind of things. It probably shows. But it is very important, particularly as we head into the phase of life that Cheltenham Borough Council is now entering, that the money we spent is spent incredibly carefully. And if you've got big ideas, now is the time to tell us. So if you have any thoughts, please do feedback on that. I also want to say a huge thank you to the finance and assets teams, not just Paul and Gemma, who are both excellent and here, so I can't say too flattering a line about them, but also to all the teams who work in things like revenue and benefits, those who work in legal to make sure that our property acquisitions and sales they get through legally and quite speedily. There is a massive, massive network of people behind the finance and assets portfolio. I do wish them all a very Merry Christmas and have a good break before the work gets started again in the new year.
Thank you very much, everybody. So there was something, Councillor Horwood, that you when you talked about the Everyman, of course, we do have the Playhouse, our amateur theatre as well, which put on a panto. And so you've got a choice. I mean, how lucky are we as Cheltenham? You've got a choice of 2 pantomimes to go to. Well, there you go. Spoilt for choice. So I just wanted to say a few things about this year. I mean, I've personally had the privilege as leader to represent Cheltenham locally and nationally at many different events through the course of this year. And one of the things I'm really clear about is that quite a lot of the things and places that I've been to, people, there's 2 things actually, which is great because that means we're doing it right, I mean, of course, it's the races, but also it's the Golden Valley, the Innovation Centre. So we're getting it right. But as we come to the end of another year, I just thought a little bit of reflection on all that we've achieved as a council, as an administration, through our manifesto and working with our officers. So, I mean, a few biggies. We welcome the housing colleagues back into in-house. None of that happened without a great deal of work. But from the point of view of our residents and our tenants and our leaseholders, it was a really smooth transaction. And particular thanks go out to that team of people. But actually, a huge thank you to Gareth, our chief exec, for his part that he played in that. And of course, the ongoing input of our tenants and leaseholders in our newly formed housing committee, which, their voice is vital, ongoing in driving that improvement and that service. So, and of course, we can't forget all about 2 little things, all-out elections for us in May this year, and then we also quickly followed by a general election, of which we, unashamedly, in this room, as members, we would say, fantastic, we've got a Lib Dem MP. And actually, from my perspective as leader, working with him, I'm not saying I didn't work with Councillor, with our previous MP, but it's very different when you work with your MP when you're the same political colour. But at the end of the day, his job and our job is to do what we believe is right for the people of Cheltenham. So I know there were lots of issues around the Minster Exchange, but how proud am I that we could actually open that officially. It's 75% full. It's also working out and it's a lovely place to be, and with the refurbished Minster Gardens as well. And of course, we're incredibly lucky here in Cheltenham that we've got amazing parks and gardens, and we've won accolades for people keeping people safe during race week. We've won accolades for our nighttime economy and also for our amazing parks and gardens. But of course, there's always things that come left field. I think one of our very senior officers was out there directing traffic and sorting out when the fire went up in Regent Arcade. In fact, we've got two of those officers here with us today, Paul and Gemma, who were out there with their high-vis jackets dealing with that. It's what we do as members and officers when we need to. We just step in as a team. And of course, we were very lucky to receive £20 million from this government to support us on another step on our journey to delivering the Innovation Centre. And I've heard all of you actually talk about our officers. Not only are they committed to what they do, but they've also helped to raise over £1,500 for charities that they chose to give to. And they've also donated nearly 400 selection boxes to be distributed into our local communities. I mean, amazing what they've done. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't challenges ahead. The change, as Councillor Collins mentioned, in the National Planning Policy Framework that was announced last week, it will see increased numbers for us, and that will make it even more important that we work with our strategic local partners. But there are it's a big paper and there's many bits to be digested. And what can I say? Yesterday's announcement, white paper announcement, I don't seem to have lived and breathed anything since 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, or 2:30, whenever it was. And of course, Councillor Lewis saying, this is the end. I think it's important that what we do is, we know that. We know what the government's clear, and actually we should be thankful in a way, if you like, for the government actually being really clear about their direction of travel. We might not agree with all of it, but it is going to happen. And the best thing that we can do is actually look to it and say, well, this is an opportunity. We will get on that bus, on that train, whatever I won't say tram, but we will go on that journey. It's going to be a very swift journey in some of the early decisions to come. But I think, that I very much hope that when we've had time to digest that paper, as districts and the county council, that we will be able to reach a consensus that is best for our county, which actually has so much to offer. The timelines are not entirely clear, but the government has said that it will be within this parliament. And then I moved on to more festive things, like our ice rink. I mean, it's a huge hit. We were brave last year when we decided to do that. And yes, last year it made a small loss, but the gross added value that we got out of that as a town was enormous. We welcomed over 30,000 skaters who spent an estimated 1.6 million in local businesses. That's 860,000 of which wouldn't have been spent here without the ice rink. So there will be an analysis of that. But, the ice rink this year has got a new look with its Christmas trees and its lights, along with the special relaxed glide session for those that actually have sensory issues and just need that peace and quiet. And I have to say that, my grandchildren really enjoyed that, and they wouldn't have gone. They'd have been in ear defenders and saying, "Oh, I can't do this." So it, you know, and I know my daughter actually left some really positive feedback for the council. She doesn't often do that. She usually just moans to me about what we're not doing. But so that's really exciting. And actually, you can have a children's party there as well, which I think is, they've called it princess themed. I did say yesterday, and I will repeat it, to say that congratulations to Cheltenham Town's women's team, having reached the 4th round of the Women's FA Cup. And that's the first time in their history. So fantastic result for them. I think, I'm sure you'd all, you know, we've thanked our officers, but we will have officers who will be working over that Christmas period, you know, that our street cleansing, the housing team, the environmental health, and of course, you know, our emergency planning teams. I think I'd like to offer you personally, to each of you cabinet members, and say a big thank you and have a good break, because I'm going to try and have a bit of a break. but thank you for your commitment to this. And actually, that the other one is to say a massive thank you to from all of us, but specifically, I'd like to say thank you to our senior leadership team. They are a force to be reckoned with. And just because it might be the end of local government as we see it, don't forget, grab it as an opportunity, because you can bet your bottom dollar that's what we'll all be doing as officers and members to get the best for Cheltenham. So that was a bit of a long one, but I just thought it was important to recap on some of where we've been. And I just would close the meeting now by saying, have a great festive season, whatever you do. Decisions, I can't close it. Thank you. We do have two, see, we do have two decisions indeed. The first decision is one from Councillor Tailford.
This was a decision to approve our purchase of new recycling vehicles that will be coming in next year. Trying to do my best Santa impression to bring the gift of even more waste to recycle. Because obviously, currently at the curbside, you can do plastic, cans, glass, paper, cardboard, food waste, garden waste if you're in the garden waste scheme. But you can also do small electricals, batteries, textiles and clothes if you put them in a bag and put them in the box. Or our pod back scheme, that's 4.5 million pods recycled since 2019 when we launched it. The first council to launch it, which I think is a really impressive thing to do. And having recently been to some LGA cabinet training, it was clear that we offer a much wider range of curbside recycling options than I think any other council I spoke to at this training thing, which is slightly concerning for them, but actually quite impressive for us, the amount that we do offer at the curbside. And these new vehicles, when we have them in, hopefully in the middle of next year, will allow us to expand that even further. Because we've been, obviously, as part of this, leading the way with a soft plastics trial in parts of Cheltenham. Once we've got these new vehicles in, we'll be able to roll that out to everyone in Cheltenham. Flexibles for everyone to be able to do at the curbside instead of having to go to the supermarket and take them with you. Obviously, we need to find someone to take those off our hands at the end of it, and that's part of the process, but this will allow us to do that. And it'll also allow us to collect Tetra Paks, cartons from your oat milk and your juice and all of those things, which at the moment are a nightmare to get rid of and really difficult to recycle. And this is well ahead of the government's targets for 2027 to offer this stuff. So I'm glad we're ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. This decision is to make some incredibly minor alterations to the very ambitious scheme that we as a council launched in living memory to raise additional council tax on long-term empty properties. Central government has now established its lines on these matters far more clearly than it had at the point in which we, as an ambitious council, were looking into this. And so we've had to make some minor wording changes, tweaks and category alterations in order to align with central government policy.
Thank you for the reminder of decisions. Perhaps we need to change that agenda item, because that's not the first time I've done that. That does now. There's nothing urgent that's been brought to my attention that I need to bring to your attention. So that does conclude our final cabinet meeting